The attack on the World Trade Center in New York City and on the Pentagon in Washington on September 11, 2001, shocked not only the United States but the world. Thousands of people have lost loved ones, and the attack has made the post-9/11 world a lot different than it was before. The news is now flooded with terrorism in the Middle East, and the Western view of Islam has completely changed. Because of the impact this one day has had on the world, it is important that you know it inside and out. In order to understand 9/11, we have to start with one man who is responsible for the attack, Osama bin Laden. Bin Laden was the son of a billionaire from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. His parents raised him as a devout Sunni Muslim, and they paid for him to study business at King Abdulaziz University. He inherited $300 million from his father, so to everyone, he seemed like he had everything. While he was at the university, he started taking religious classes, and this is when his life drastically changed. While taking these religious classes, he studied many interpretations of the Quran, but his interpretation was not really on the loving side, but more on the violent, extremist side. He started becoming more interested in jihad than business, and in the 70s and 80s, he decided to devote his time carrying out jihad when he went to Afghanistan. At the time, Afghanistan was being invaded by the Soviet Union, so the Afghans needed a powerful group to help them fight against them. Bin Laden came in and created a group called the Mujahideen. Here, he met Ayman al-Zawahiri, and the more radical he got. They shared the ideology that if somebody did not agree with the extremist view of Islam, they were wrong, and killing them was justified. Slowly, the Mujahideen became more and more of an extremist group. Eventually, bin Laden and other members of the Mujahideen got together and formed a powerful extremist group, which they called Al-Qaeda. They shared many ideologies, including that innocent civilians, including women and children, were targets for jihadists to kill. They shared a burning hatred towards the United States, saying how their foreign policy has oppressed, killed, and otherwise harmed Muslims in the Middle East. But it wasn't only for our foreign policy, but our culture. We aren't Muslim, and we are loose when it comes to sex, homosexuality, intoxication, and gambling, all things that are seen as sinful in bin Laden's view. He also didn't like that our media was, quote, ran by Jews, mostly because he was a heavy anti-Semite. This also led him to disapprove of America's support of Israel, especially during the Gulf War in the 90s. All this in the presence of U.S. troops in Saudi Arabia during the Gulf War angered bin Laden even further. So he got together with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who helped him create anti-Western, anti-American, and anti-Semitic propaganda. They created a television program and a magazine. This helped Al-Qaeda grow stronger, which didn't make it difficult for bin Laden to plan his first attack. In 1998, Al-Qaeda bombed 2 U.S. embassies, one in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, and one in Nairobi, Kenya. Over 200 people died, and this really sent a signal to the United States that Al-Qaeda was a serious threat that could not be brushed away. After the attack, bin Laden got together with Mohammed, and they planned an even worse attack that would take place in New York City and Washington, D.C.
On this horrible day, the United States was under attack, but did not realize it until later on. On 9/11, 4 planes were involved. One hit the North Tower, one hit the South Tower, one hit the Pentagon, and one crashed in an empty field in Pennsylvania. The terrorists would get on the plane during the flight, and they would raid the cockpit. To enter the cockpit, they would use box cutters and take many people hostage, threatening to kill them. At about 8:45 a.m., the first plane hit the North Tower of the World Trade Center. It was an American airline carrying 20,000 gallons of fuel. The plane hit at about the 80th floor, causing everyone above to be trapped. At this point, everyone believed it was a freak accident. Workers in the South Tower were told to stay inside the building. But then 18 minutes later, another American airline flight hit the South Tower at about the 60th floor. This is when panic broke out in New York. Everyone began to run and get as far away from the building, knowing that it would soon fall. At 9:59 a.m., the South Tower fell to the ground, causing so much debris to fly in the air. The North Tower collapsed at 10:28. New York was under a cloud of debris at this point. People were hurt, lying on the ground, yelling for help. Some people were even trapped within the fallen building. America was also under attack in Washington, D.C. At 9:45 a.m., an American airline flight hit the west side of the Pentagon, killing 189 people. At this point, everyone knew that America was under attack. The most common plane that is forgotten about during these attacks was Flight 93. This plane did not exactly hit any important building in particular, but crashed in an empty field in Pennsylvania, killing about 45 people. The plane had been delayed before taking off, so passengers on the plane were able to hear about other hijackings and attacks going on around the world. This plane was hijacked about 40 minutes into the flight. Passengers, knowing about what had happened with other hijacked flights, knew that they had to do something to stop this plane from hitting any other building. At this point, all of the passengers figured out that they needed to raid the cockpit and fight against terrorists. Passengers ran to the cockpit with boiling water and fire extinguishers. These passengers were able to take over the plane but were not able to keep it under control. The plane flipped over, traveling about 500 miles per hour downward. The plane then crashed at 10:10 a.m. in an empty field in Pennsylvania. Now many of you may be wondering, where was George Bush and what was he doing during the attack on America? Well, George Bush was actually in Florida at an elementary school reading to students. Before he went into the classroom to read, he was informed about the first plane hitting the North Tower. He continued to go on with reading to the children, though. While he was reading to the students, he was then informed about the second plane hitting the South Tower and still continued to read. He did not end up leaving the school until about 9:30 a.m. and was shuttled around the country all day because of security concerns. Now it's time for the mystery document. Here are the rules. I have to read this document and guess who said it. If I get it wrong, I get shocked by this chopstick. Terrorist attacks can shake the foundation of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America. These acts shatter steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve. Was it the Mongols? It was actually George Bush talking about 9/11 the day of.
Sadly, on this day, 2,996 people died. After the building's collapse, it continued to burn for 69 days. Volunteers and workers worked on going through the debris at Ground Zero for 230 days. Every day at Ground Zero, there were 343,000 hot meals served. 26 days after 9/11, the United States military began to bomb Afghanistan.
Either you're with us, either you love freedom and with nations which embrace freedom, or you're with the enemy.
The United States and the United Kingdom military budget raised by the billions in 2002, which helped them drop over 22,000 bombs in 6 months, killing nearly 4,000 civilians. 2 months after the attack, Congress passed the Aviation and Transportation Security Act. This is the reason we have to show up hours before flights so that the TSA can check all of our luggage. After 9/11, the United States was even considering nuking Afghanistan. This is crazy that the United States was considering nuking Afghanistan. After many years through the war in Afghanistan, on May 1st, 2011, Barack Obama announced that Osama bin Laden was killed.
The United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden, the leader of al-Qaeda.
He was killed by a small group of Americans who found him in the northern Pakistan. Although bin Laden was killed, the threat of terrorism still is out there. 9/11 was a turning point for America. Even though it happened in 2001, its effects still influence us today. Our airports have been much more secure. Before boarding a plane, we must go through several airport security checks. The government has also put a lot of effort into checking our phones and computers, but our view on Islam has changed completely. Our judgments over a few have completely painted over our view of what Islam means. Our media seem to have a negative view on Islam.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States.
To be clear, you're saying no Muslims, only Christians.
Reza, be honest, though, for the most part, it is not a free and open society for women.
From Middle Eastern countries where ISIS and al-Qaeda have control.
I mean, again, this is the problem, is that you're talking about a religion of 1.5 billion people, and certainly it becomes very easy to just simply paint them all with a single brush.
That's all for today. Until next time. Right here, if you would like to, you can watch our next video. That's my high school history teacher. I would like to say thank you to her. And I would like to thank Mr. Butler for letting us borrow all of his equipment. I would like to thank the school for letting us borrow their computers all year long. I would like to thank Matty Productions. I would like to thank Alex. I would like to thank my mom. I would like to thank everyone